It's Jesus time, it's Jesus time, it's Jesus time.
Welcome to this week's edition of Jesus Time. This week, we're going to talk about rules.
Rules?
God's rules.
Man, I don't want to have to talk about rules. Rules are boring. Rules are not fun. They're just complicated.
No, see, God's rules aren't that complicated.
Are you kidding me? Have you read the Bible?
Yeah, I've read the Bible.
The Bible is full of rules. And they're all over the place. Don't do this. Do that. Don't covet. Honor your parents. Stand up. Kneel down. Forgive 70 times 7 times. Eat fish fry every Friday.
But wait. That one's not exactly in the Bible.
Well, yeah, it is. That's why it's called Friday.
It's not called Friday because of fish fry.
Then why is fish fry always on Friday?
Oh, okay. I agree, all right, that people can make rules way more complicated than maybe they need to be. But in this week's readings, Jesus himself shows us that God's rules for us don't have to be that complicated. In fact, Jesus simplifies God's rules to only 2 rules.
2 rules?
2 rules, only 2 rules. And Fish Fry Friday isn't even one of those rules.
But can we still have fish fry?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Tell you what, why don't you do the first reading?
Thus says the Lord, you shall not oppress an alien, for you yourselves were once aliens in the land of Egypt. You shall not wrong any widow or orphan. If you ever wrong them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry. If you lend money to one of your poor neighbors among my people, you shall not act like an extortioner toward him by demanding interest from him. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you shall return it to him by sunset. For this cloak of his is his only covering for his body. What else has he to sleep in? If he cries out to me, I will hear him, for I am compassionate.
You see, God's rules aren't so complicated.
I don't know, Dad. Some of those rules are kind of weird.
What do you mean?
Well, some of them I get. Like the last one, right? If someone needs their coat, you give it to them before they get cold. And they need it.
Right, you give it back to them, right.
Right. And being nice to widows and orphans, yeah, that makes sense, but why just widows and orphans?
Oh, well, see, the first reading talks about widows and orphans because at the time and the place where that Bible story was written, widows and orphans were some of the most poor, the most vulnerable in society, because they didn't have any family that could provide for them or care for them. So when God is saying in the Bible, be nice to widows and orphans, what he's really saying is be especially nice to the most vulnerable in the community, the ones who need the most help.
I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the rule of not taking advantage of someone who's lent you money when you lend them money?
Well, it's the same thing, because it's if someone needs help, and if you're in a position to help them, then you help them, and you do it without taking advantage of them, just because they don't have those things. You don't take advantage of them, you help them.
Oh, that explains the rule about giving back the person their cloak once they need it.
Yeah, exactly. See, what all those rules have in common is that when a person needs help, and you can help them, you help them. You don't take advantage of them, you don't oppress them, you don't do anything to make their situation worse.
Right. What about space aliens?
What?
Space aliens. The first rule talks about space aliens.
Not space aliens. Alien means someone from somewhere else, someone who's visiting but not from the place.
Like a space alien.
Do you run into a lot of space aliens?
I can't really be sure.
Well, human visitors are a lot more common. Like, for instance, immigrants, like me.
Yeah, right. You came to the United States when you were 5.
Yeah, with my family. And we were lucky. We had money and my dad had a job. We spoke English, but many immigrants don't speak the language of the place that they're moving to. And many don't have money because they have to leave their home in a hurry without taking any money, without taking any of their stuff. And sometimes they do that because they're in danger or people are actually trying to, kill them.
Right, when Joseph and Mary and Jesus had to flee to Egypt when Jesus was a baby so that he wouldn't be killed.
Right, exactly. And that's why God says be good to immigrants and aliens, because every one of us is an immigrant or a descendant of an immigrant. Hola. So I want to share with you a little cultural tradition from Mexico, which is where I'm from. I want to tell you about El Día de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. About this time of year, you've probably seen the colorful skulls and skeletons that are part of this holiday celebration. Or maybe you've seen the animated movie Coco. The images of El Día de los Muertos are pretty common in the US nowadays, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about the holiday. Some people ask me if it's Mexican Halloween. Some ask me if it's a celebration of death. But it's really not either of those things. Like a lot of Mexican cultural traditions, El Día de los Muertos blends together European traditions with the traditions of Mexico's indigenous people. The holiday centers on the idea that after people die in this world, their life continues in a different way in the next world. In other words, death and life are just different phases of one big journey. On El Día de los Muertos, we remember family and friends who have passed on to the next world, but we think of them like they're still living, just in a different way and in a different place. We also reflect on how we also one day will move on from this world into the next. But El Día de los Muertos is not a sad day. It's a celebration. That's why the holiday is full of colors and flowers and sweet treats and music. Oh, and those skulls and skeletons, they aren't meant to be scary. Exactly the opposite. The skulls and the skeletons are meant to show that we know that our bodies are just temporary and that we're not scared of death. One of my favorite Día de los Muertos traditions is the altar and las ofrendas. Altars are usually set up in people's homes. They can be very elaborate or they can be pretty simple. But what they all have in common is that they're pretty colorful, with colorful banners and cloths and little bits that remind you of the persons who have passed on. So this is an altar that I put together for my mom, who died a little over 10 years ago. On an altar, you usually have, here's a photo of my mom holding me when I was a baby. And usually you put the ofrendas, which are little offerings. They can be things that remind you of the person or things that used to belong to the person. I've got also like a little cross on here, a candle, a rosary, and some sugar skulls. But I also have some popcorn because popcorn was her favorite snack. And it's pretty common to put little food items, treats, or drinks even, that were their favorite drinks when they were alive. And I also put a trashy romance novel because my mom loved trashy romance novels, which is kind of funny. Actually, that's another cool thing about the altars and the ofrendas, because it's pretty common to put little things like that, tease them, that are like jokes or that are funny. And you tease not to be mean-spirited or anything like that. It's kind of the way that you lightly tease someone in your family or someone that you love or you really care for. And by making jokes or teasing the people who have passed on, it helps them seem a little more like they're still here, like they're still alive. And it also says, again, that we're not afraid of death. We're not afraid of what it's like. So you can also make an altar in your home. If you want to do that, what you need is first a little space that you can decorate, and you'll need some help from a grown-up. Decorate the space up, make it colorful. You can have little paper banners or things like that. And then you have to choose someone or many people that have died, grandparents, great-grandparents in your family. And if you don't know anyone who died, maybe talk to your grown-up about people that are in your family that passed on that maybe you didn't meet. See if you can get a picture of them and find out a little bit about them. What are some of the things that they liked? What are some of the things that they did? And you can put them out here and share some stories, maybe even some funny stories, and then say a little prayer for them. You can pray that they're doing well, and you can thank them for the time that they were here on Earth.
That was interesting, Dad.
Yeah.
You know how the first reading said you should be good to the aliens, to people from other countries.
Right.
I think learning about people from other countries and their cultures can really help you understand and be more welcoming to aliens.
I think you're right.
But I still have an issue.
And what's that?
You said Jesus simplifies God rules to just 2 rules.
Right.
But the first reading still had way more than 2 rules. Like, a lot.
Yeah, well, way to pay attention, Miguel. But let's read what the gospel has to say. The Gospel of Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments." The Gospel of the Lord. Ta-da! 2 rules. Love God completely and love your neighbor as yourself.
And all those other rules in the Bible were just covered by those 2 rules.
That's it.
Be good to aliens.
Love God and love your neighbor.
Be kind to those less fortunate.
Love God, love your neighbor.
Fish fry on Fridays.
Not really God's rule, but it's kind of a church rule, so I guess it kind of falls under love God.
This feels like a trick. It's too easy. Some kind of life hack or something.
No, it's not a hack, and it's not always easy. Believe me, there are times when loving your neighbor like yourself takes a lot of work and a lot of patience. Like if your neighbor's mean to you or does something you think is wrong, it can be really hard to love them, but that's the rule. And that's what we as Christians are called to do and what we try to do.
I like having 2 rules because sometimes it's hard to remember all those specific rules.
Yeah.
And if I can't remember the specific rule, I can just apply those rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I don't know how to treat someone, I can just ask, what would Jesus do? Yeah. Or I can treat them the way I'd want to be treated.
Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Why, that's
the golden
rule!
So now that we've got it down to 2 rules, do I still have to go to church?
Yes, that's one of the rules.
Love God, right?
Right. And it still is a good idea to go to church, to ask questions, to pray and read the Bible, learn.
And watch Jesus Time?
You know it. So until next time, it's Jesus time, Jesus time, Jesus time.